today we have a little bit of a longer video ahead of us. We're going to deal with how to choose a racket and the process of choosing a racket. That's where many of you are, like a jungle of rackets right now, strength, customizations, brands, marketing, and all that. So if you're not settled on a racket, or if you're considering switching to a new racket, this could hopefully be helpful to you. If it is, please subscribe and check out tennisnerd.net for more of this content, but also other tools to improve. First step of finding a racket is to understand your own game, to understand who you are as a player, where you are in your level, your weaknesses and your strengths. Like, what is the player looking? So where are they now? Where do they want to go? For example, you have a certain racket, you have a certain string, it leads you to having tennis elbow, or it gives you not enough power, it gives you not enough spin, and that's why you're looking to switch. And if you're happy with your racket, I always suggest to stay with that unless it's like sold out, you cannot restock it. There are other reasons why you can't play with this racket, but if you have a racket setup you like, that you play well with, there's really no reason to change. The issue is sometimes marketing tells you that you will be a much better player with the new racket. That's rarely the case. Very important to have a long, hard look in the mirror and to see, where do I need to go to improve and what do I need to change. So make sure you videotape your sessions. So these are some characteristics you can choose from. Like, the power scale is a tricky one, because sometimes you can get more power by adding weight to the racket. So you increase the swing weight, you can reduce the tension, so you get more free depth. The string bit has a bit more of a catapult effect when you lower the tension of the strings. So there are things you can always tweak things, and I would definitely recommend trying to tweak your racket first before you're going for a new one. You can add some weight into the handle, you can change the grip a little bit. Some brands like Head allow a palette change, so you can even change the shape a bit. You can put some tape. So there are a lot of tweaks you can do, and I always suggest starting with tweaks and seeing if that's going to improve how the racket feels. Like, more stable, the extra weight will add stability, will add power. Subtracting weight is more difficult. You have to go for a thinner gauge string, maybe not a leather grip, go to a synthetic grip, which is lighter. You have to find ways to reduce the weight, which is not easy. So it's much easier to add weight. That's why I generally recommend going for a racket that is lighter than your desired weight if you're open to doing some minor customization. Just a tad lighter gives you a bit more room for some quality control issues that might arise. There's plus minus 7 grams on most manufacturers. Some do plus minus 5, some try to do even better, but it's rarely the case. So the case can be that one racket is 14 grams heavier than the other one. That's the extreme of the plus minus 7 grams. So you have to take that into account, and that's why I think going a bit lighter than your intended weight. The key rule for finding a racket is to have a racket that is the heaviest possible, that you can manipulate when you're getting tired. Like on defense, for example, running around, that you feel like the racket is not pulling or dragging or making you play different. If the racket is making you change your swing, I think it's not really the one. It has to feel more like a glove, has to feel more natural, that when you're on defense, you're not letting the racket take over, and it's not hampering you in the racket head speed, which is so important. Like, when you're going for control, one of those famous things to learn is to just have more spin on your shots, not pushing the ball. And it's better to whip it faster, but with more top spin to increase the control. If you're not playing matches or tournaments, then it's a little bit of a different thing. I would definitely optimize more for the feel and the comfort, because you're playing for fun. You want a racket that's fun to use and puts a smile on your face. When you're playing tournament matches, you want a racket that's quite balanced for your game, that doesn't really pull down your backhand and raise your serve, but just keeps things kind of level and works on all shots. Might require some minor adjustments here and there, but it's overall like a balanced racket. I always try to look for the balance instead of going for the extremes, because if you go for the extremes to maximize one shot, you're really sacrificing some other abilities you have on the tennis court. I think in the long run it's not really going to work. I mean, unless you're like Riley Opelka and the serve is your bread and butter to make prize money and have a good career, then I wouldn't optimize for the strength only. I would really look at a more balanced, holistic approach. It works on my backhand, it works on my forehand. It's not the best for my forehand of all rackets, but it's good enough, So trying to find the balance is always important. You decided you want a new racket. It's important to give the racket time. You have to demo. It has to be a racket that feels right, That's important. If you're trying to go against the grain and like play with something that someone suggested, but it doesn't feel good, don't do it. I don't think that's a good idea. So it has to feel right, has to give you a balanced sense of your abilities, and a racket you pick up you have a smile on your face, you find it's enjoyable to play with. I think those things are very important for finding the right racket. So if you're completely clueless, you can obviously go for a consultation, try to read up, watch a lot of YouTube videos, look at recommendations. Beware of racket marketing. You can get older models that are as good or even better in some cases than the current crop of rackets. The racket tech has not changed that drastically in the last 5 years. Maybe if you go back 20 years, there is some, more forgiveness in the modern rackets. The sweet spot a little bit more generous. So I think some things have definitely been improved. Most people would do better, like going up in head size a little bit instead of playing with their old 90 square inch racket. But we're not all the same, so I don't want to give like a blanket statement, but generally that's what I see. And a lot of rackets today are more forgiving, but can still offer good control. So a racket category I really recommend it a lot to a lot of intermediate players, which are most of you watching this, is to go for a racket that's like 100 square inch control racket. Like that gives you some control, some balance of abilities. And I've already talked about like the Blade 100, the Dunlop CX 400 Tour, Head Speed MP, and rackets like these. These are excellent rackets that give you a mix and don't have like one extreme or the other. If control is the name of your game, we'll go at 98. I mean, 98 today is the control head size, and I wouldn't really go below that unless you're really specific of wanting a small head that moves a bit faster. So at 98, there's so many different ones. You can get the new RF, which is a little control, but a little bit more powerful 98, good on the slice. You can go for a Prestige, which is the most controlled 98 possible. A Blade, which is in the middle. You can go for like an FX 500 Tour, which is a power 98, or a pure drive 98, or pure aero 98. These are like heavier on the spin. So they're 98 rackets of all the different categories: power, spin, control, touch. You cannot find them all in the spectrum of 98 square inch rackets. That's where most players are. There are good rackets that are 104 square inches, 105 square inches, but those are generally lighter rackets, and for most intermediate players, you're gonna find the answer in the 98 to 100. And then the process that starts is the demo. Tennis Warehouse offers a demo program, Tennis Warehouse Europe as well, and you can get like 4 rackets for a week, try them around. Issue with demos, you need to give rackets time. Will this be enough time for you to hit properly with the racket? Well, at least we'll give you a taste, so I think that is good. Because when you get a demo racket, usually, unless you're stringing yourself and you can restring it, then you might be playing with old strings, and that's going to affect the racket quite a bit. Really consider also strings when you're thinking about tweaking your racket, changing something. You can change the string, you can change the tension, and suddenly you have a different racket, a racket that plays a little bit different at least and gives you a lot. I would say strings are half of the racket. Then we get into the specifications, which is important to understand. In the Tennis Nerd Guide to Gear on tennisnerd.net, you can check out what racket weight, head sizes, length, and so on. I'm actually looking at the website as I'm talking to you. Balance, swing weight, and these metrics. Weight, as I said, play with as heavy as you can manipulate, move it around, even when you're tired and defending in a match. Some players love heavy rackets. We've even made like a long video about heavy rackets, actually 2 parts in that video series, because you're gonna get power, you're gonna get some stability from the heavy rackets. Some just love playing with them. Maybe they play even better with those. But it's not for everyone. Some people prefer lighter rackets that allow them to really manipulate the racket head and swing it faster. So you have to understand where you're coming from. Generally, if you started your tennis life playing with a certain specification, it's going to be difficult to do a drastic change. You want to do like a small tweak, and just move gradually to a heavier racket. Don't just jump up. I think generally that's not the best idea. You want to stay within your specifications. I try everything on the market pretty much, but I generally have like a set of specifications that I tend to play my best at. So that's important to know. Head sizes, I would only really bother with 9800. If you're a beginner, I would go a bit bigger, maybe 105, but over that, only if you're really struggling to generate power and you have a really short swing. So this head size, the smaller the head size, the more the control, but the bigger the head size, the more forgiveness. You have a bit more free depth, free power. The length, generally go standard. You don't need a longer racket unless that's what you're used to, and you really crave it for a better serve. That's generally it. Like go 27 inches, it's a 68.58 centimeters. I wouldn't care so much. Balance, yeah, that's how the racket balances. Some people like a lot of weight in the handle so that the racket feels lighter than it is, but it's still a little bit beefy. My friend Daniel, who loves heavy rackets, like to add a lot of weight to the handle. And I know other pros that do that, Dan Evans, for example, but there's many others. And so it depends a bit on your style. Like 4 or 5 points headlight seems to be like a standard today with most rackets, and that's generally fine. 4 or 5 points headlight, that's like 33 centimeters, 32.5. strung. That's where most specs are. If the manufacturer are listing unstrung, which is generally what they do, but in some cases, Tennis Warehouse, they list strung weight. So that's going to be higher. That's going to be 20 grams higher in terms of weight added by the strings. And it's going to move the balance point 1 centimeter higher as well. So it does affect everything. And the swing weight 30 points. So these things, if you add strings, you're going to affect the specs. So it's good to know. Beam width, that's really personal. Like how thick is the cross section of the racket? Is it like a boxy beam? Is it in different thicknesses? Is it aerodynamic? Does it have like this arrow? Weird to maybe hold on the one-hander, especially some players really love to hold the throat. That's really up to you. Thin rackets, generally low-powered. Thick rackets give you more power, more stability, but a little bit more sluggish swing. And also stiffer, so it can really be a bit tougher on the arm in some cases. String patterns, there are generally two popular string patterns. 60-19 for a bit more spin. Depending on how they drill the pattern, you get even more open, like the holes are bigger, so the ball really sinks in and shoots out. You're going to have more catapult, you're going to have a higher launch angle. Or you have 18-20, which is kind of the densest on the market. There are some exceptions, but that's super dense in most cases. But then you can also drill a bigger head size with 18-20 and have a pretty open 18-20. So 100 square inch 18-20 is obviously going to be more open in the holes than a 95 square inch 18-20, which was the standard racket if you go back. Stiffness, don't bother so much with the stiffness rating. I mean, unless the racket is like 70 RA strung, then it might be too stiff for some of you. Stiffness can affect elbows if there's no dampening in the racket. The vibrations tend to go down. Not all rackets with high stiffness are stiff for the arm or are bad for the arm. Dampening, how they place the stiffness. I mean, they measure this in like 7 different locations. It's an average, so it's like, it's kind of tricky to read too much in, but if the stiffness is very high, you're sure that this racket's going to be powerful, and it might lead to some vibrations. Might be completely fine in some cases, depending on the layup, what's inside the racket, or the dampening technology. But overall, if you're really worried about arm, I wouldn't go too high up. So usually you see rackets between 55 to 75 in stiffness, 55 being very flexible. The racket really bends on impact, ball stays long time in the string bed, feels a bit like a trampoline, and you go 75 where the ball just shoots out, you know, it doesn't have any dwell time on the string bed. Most rackets today, somewhere in the middle, 65-ish, strong. And also when you string a racket, the stiffness drops, right? You put strings in the racket, it compresses the racket, the stiffness drops, it becomes a little bit more flexible. So you have a 70 RA stiffness unstrung, that's going to go down to like 67 strung. So that's good also to keep in mind. So those are different parameters, but you have to feel it out, see what works. I have done like best rackets per category videos, one of my favorite spin rackets, but it's obviously my subjective opinion. I do bring other playtesters, but I generally really urge you to demo and test and see what works for your game. It's all very individual, right? So if we look at the different categories of rackets, if you're looking for a control racket, I would urge you to consider Head Prestige, Radical, Wilson Blade, Technifiber, TF40 or T-Fight. These are all good control lines. Dunlop CX. Control rackets generally is like go for around 98 square inch, and you're going to have a huge option of rackets to choose from. And for me, it changes a little bit on and off depending on like my favorite rackets at the time. But overall, the rackets today are really excellent, like in terms of quality and stuff, so you don't need to worry too much about that. You can read through or watch the reviews on my YouTube channel or on the website tennisnerd.net to get an idea of what's hot or what's not in rackets right now. But if we start with control rackets like the Blade 98, just very, very good. One of the best ones on the market. I think that also has a little bit of power, a little bit of help, and not completely as difficult to use as maybe a Prestige, which is more old school racket. From Head, the Radical I think is a good option. Solinco has the White Out, also another solid option as well from a smaller brand. Dunlop has the CX 200. That's an excellent frame as well. Technifiber TF40, good one, just recently released a new one. Babolat Pure Strike's a little bit firmer, but a little bit more power as well. So that's also an option if you're a Babolat player. So there's like a 97, 98 square inch control racket, Wilson RF as well. There's so many good 98 square inch control rackets on the market. For spin, if you spin and launch is very important for you if you want the ball to go high. Pure Aero 98 used by Alcaraz. Head Extreme Pro for a bit more control. Was also good. You have rackets like the Dunlop SX 300 Tour, which is a whippier racket, a little bit lighter, more room for customization than Aero. Also a Yonex V-Core 98, of course, which is a little bit more flexible in this sense. So there's a bunch of spin rackets that kind of give you some spin and some power and a little bit higher launch angle. If you want the ball to go more through the court with a 98, you go for the ESO 98, which is a powerful 98 square inch racket. You can go the Pure Drive 98, which is a bit stiffer, even more powerful. So there are power rackets like the Dunlop FX500 Tour that Popperin is using, for example. Rackets with a bit more power level. Spin rackets, you can go either 98 or 100. Control rackets, either 98 or 100. Power rackets, either 98 or 100. You can go the big versatile in-between category with rackets like the Headspeed MP, Dunlop CX400 Tour, the Wilson Blade 100, etc, etc. Even like a racket like the Pro Kenix KIQ Plus 5 Pro is an excellent kind of versatile frame. So you're gonna get a bit of everything. Not everyone likes the 100 square inch, but that's generally good. Spin rackets with a bit more forgiveness, Aero 100, V-Core 100, Dunlop SX 300. There's so many different spin rackets that are good. So generally, like, it's not so easy to say this is better than the other ones because they're all quality products. You just need to demo and see, like, I like this brand, I like this design, but there's gonna be something for you in this category because there's so many rackets to choose from, right? It's an endless array of rackets, so it's not that difficult to find a racket. If you ask too much from the racket, I think it can be a headache. Like if you really ask the racket to be perfect, because no racket is perfect, you're gonna have issues and you're gonna have days where you don't feel good on the tennis court and you're not playing well. Doesn't matter what racket you use, doesn't matter if you change the racket, which I've done in tournaments as well. I've changed rackets 3 times just to try to find something. I maybe play better with one racket, but a lot of it can be mental, like so it drives a little bit of insecurity overall of your choice. So it's better to just have one racket in the bag, kind of, maybe, and just use that probably. But in my crazy tennis life, it's been like that, where I can change in between rackets. But overall, you can't ask for everything from a racket. When you find a string in a racket and a customization and a setup that works for you, you know, stay with that. Buy a few different ones. You can try different tensions and so on. And then you're good. Then you work with that. You try to improve as a player. Unless you're really a collector or someone that enjoys rackets, this is the approach to go for, I think. So that's it. I wanted to give you an update on some thinking around rackets and the selection process. I always learn new things throughout the years, playing like 5 times a week and trying to improve my game and testing all the different rackets and so on. I do urge everyone to not go too crazy. I know the strings can also be a jungle. Should I use a 6-sided? Should I use a 4-sided? Should I use a round polyester? Should I use a multi-filament string? And that's a topic for a different video. But definitely that's the next step of experimentation when you have your racket and maybe your specs dialed in. So I know many of you are on this journey, and there is no perfect racket. It's just about like trying to find a balanced one that doesn't really hold you back too much, and don't blame the racket too much when things are going wrong. We all love blaming the racket, but generally it's not so easy to sometimes troubleshoot what is going wrong. Is it my footwork? Didn't I sleep properly? It's just tennis, you know. Tennis happens. You don't play well one day, the opponent plays well, and you lose, and that's fine. New day tomorrow, new match tomorrow. You go and you play that. Don't go and just start shopping for new rackets as soon as you lose. Of course, Tennis Warehouse might like you to do that, and if you like to buy rackets, please do that through my links, because I get a small commission. But I really don't urge you to buy anything unless you really need it, you know. And that's where I try to be of some honest help. TNerd10 if you want 10% off Tennis Warehouse Europe. Have a nice day now, and don't forget to play some tennis.